Good afternoon. This is Coach Z with the Then and Now. And today we're going to have a really a highly respected educator and a highly respected referee. Quite frankly, one of the greatest referees to ever walk the floor. My friend, longtime friend, great referee, retired superintendent of schools in Edwardsville, Ed Hightower will be our guest today. You know, I used to always, when you and I traveled together, and I used to always just tell people, I said, how the hell does Hightower get away? Superintendent of schools. He just leaves and he's gone and he this and that. And then I went to your retirement, and I want to thank you again for inviting Sue and I to your retirement.
Oh,
And
yes.
and at the retirement, and probably been a change in the money since then, but you raised about $18 million. Is that right, Doctor? With
I
your
rate I raised four more than that, Ron, for all of the various facilities, the roads, everything over here in Edwardsville. So no, it was a lot more than that, guys. I would say that I was directly responsible for raising over $100 million for the school district, for the city, the community, and all. So yes, my fingerprints were on a lot of those kinds of things.
well, once I heard that at the retirement dinner, and by the way, didn't I sit with Ron Grissom that night?
You did. You
Well, let me
did.
tell you, and I'll go into that in a minute to tell you. But on the way home that night, I said to Sue, I said, I finally understand why they didn't care if the good doctor was gone. He took good care of that district. And after the season was over, you were there almost every day, weren't you, Ed?
Well, Ron, again, remember I flew privately a lot, and which you flew some with me as well, and so it worked out well. Where we had some long nights, you and I, but we were able to get back, and so that was a lot of years of just juggling some tough long nights, as you will attest, and then maintaining the day job. And so it was tough. But, Ron, I don't think it could happen today. It could, there's no way with, going to Oregon or going in the Big 12 all the way out to Washington State or something like that, or Washington, whatever these schools are. It would be very, very difficult to maintain a full-time job today.
Well, now I'm going to talk more about that. But I did some research because we had that discussion about when I took two of my daughters on a trip on TWA when they were having one fly free. Well, anyway, it was Emily. Okay, it was Emily. So I come to the airport with two of my daughters, and only one of them can really get on the plane with me. But um, my daughter Emily became Dr. Hightower's daughter that day, so she could get on the plane. And then we went to the game, and we had a great time. And then after the game, my daughters, they were very young. They were running all over that restaurant and crawling under the table and doing all that. And then you called your wife. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, if you recall, we get to you had called me and say, yeah, I'm going to take two of my daughters we were going to Wichita. He
Wichita
says,
State, yes.
yeah, that's right. And if you recall, TWA, it was just great for St. Louis. They had all kinds of flights in the afternoon, and then they had those early morning flights coming back. So we would be back here by 6:30 the following morning. So it was great, So, but anyway, we get to the airport, and you say, Ed, I need you to take one of my daughters on the plane. And I guess it was Emily. And so, of course, Emily and we walk onto the plane, and the stewardess is looking at the two of us and saying, wait a minute here. Is this authentic? Is this real? And Emily, she played it up well. I played it up well. We went on, got our seats, and then of course we get to Wichita. Um, we go out to dinner, and I had called Barbara and said, Barbara, I tell you what, with this companion deal that we've got now, that TWA has offered, I think I'm going to take Julie and Jennifer to a game. And and so then we got to the restaurant. Well, first of all, your kids are running around doing the basketball game while you and I are trying to referee. Then we go to dinner, and they're running around the restaurant. They're getting into everything. And I called Barbara back and I said, hey, Barbara, you know what I told you about taking Julie and Jennifer to a game? Forget that. That's not going to happen. I'm not taking those two girls to a game. But when I see your daughters, as a matter of fact, I called you recently. I saw you with your daughters and all. And I said, hey, Ron, do you remember when I adopted one of your daughters to go to the Wichita game? So, Ron, when we talk about refereeing, a lot of people say that a lot of officials say that, hey, refereeing is a lot of fun. You gain all of these friendships. Well, I don't think that's true. Friendship is something that is lasting. With referees, everything is transitional. I'm sorry, transactional. And but yours and my relationship, friendship, it's endured time, and I really consider you one of my closest friends.
I feel the same, and I'm real quick. You'll remember this. Because you just mentioned Wichita State. Remember when Henry Nichols, when he was he was national coordinator, right? Ed, remember the night?
Yes,
So
yes.
Henry's going to referee with you and me, and then of course the great late Johnny Overby. He's there to observe us. I'll never forget this, Ed. We refereed a game. It was whatever game. Nichols, it was a non-league game early in the year. We're in the locker room, and he says to you, hey, Eddie, you want to, critique? You said, yeah, he tells you what. Then he says to me, you don't even know what a traveling is yet. He's really all over me. And then he says to Nichols, I remember this like yesterday. He says, Henry, you want to critique? And Nichols thought he was John. Henry, I'm being very serious right now. I observed you very well. You had a very bad game, Henry. John, how about Johnny Overby?
Hey, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. First of all, he walks in and he's on me. And, John was just like a dad to all of us, okay? It was dad over V, okay? And he talked to us like he was our dad. And, of course, he would say, Hightower, Eddie, you missed at 5.1 seconds on the clock. You missed this. You missed that. You missed that. And Ron, at 2.1 on the clock, you missed this. And you're going to have to improve in those areas. If you're going to make it, of course, he was on me about wearing contact lenses at that time, remember? And he said to me, Eddie.
I remember. Go ahead, say it. It's awesome.
Eddie, do you want to referee at this level? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Nichols. Then you need to get rid of those blankety blank glasses. Now, I'm gonna keep it clean. He says, you know why? No, sir. He says, they always call you guys, say you can't see. But you know what they're saying about you? They're saying that you are a full-eyed, blankety blank official. Now, if you have any hope of becoming a referee, you got to get rid of those glasses. And Ron Zetcher, here's what you need to do. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Overby. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nichols, you call yourself the coordinator of officials? Do you want to critique? Or Henry, you were awful tonight.
And boy, you're so right, Eddie. So listen, I want to get into a little bit, and I really, I don't like to, doggone it, I'm going to have to, but I was going through your resume. It is like beyond, it's beyond impressive, Ed. So the Golden Whistle Award, right? The
Yep.
Naismith,
Yep.
Official of the Year award. Not many guys have gotten that Naismith award. I think you might have been the guy who got it right after Henry Nichols. Is that correct?
I was. I got it pretty soon. I was probably about the third or fourth guy to receive it. But I was pretty fortunate. Very, very
Well,
fortunate.
fortunate and earned. Is this the way it goes? 12 Final Fours. You want me to tell you about those 12 Final Fours? And I'm good at math, Hightower. So if we're playing just a little softball game, but we're talking about Final Fours, and you're on one team and I'm on the other, you get 12, and I'm shut out. I'm shut out. I never made it to a Final Four, but you know what? I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I'm thankful for the ones I went to, you know, and I would never, ever, ever say that because I never got to a Final Four. You know, like you said before, the good friendships, the good lasting friendships, and you're so right before, Edwin, what you said. There's so many guys. I'm going to give you a good example. Steve Welmer's a really good guy.
Absolutely.
And Steve Welmer was a very, very, very close close to Dale Kelly. Really close.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so when Steve was refereeing, everybody wanted to be around him because they wanted games from Dale Kelly. And
That's right.
I talked to Steve not long ago. He doesn't hear from anybody. You know why? Can't do anything for him. Isn't that pathetic?
Uh, Ron, I said, this officiating is all transactional. Okay, and I that's about as true a statement as could be made about the state of this what we called used to be an avocation, but now it's a profession. Now it's all about what can you do for me, and you know but I want to go back to the Final Four. There were a lot of guys out there that did not make it to a Final Four, but I'm gonna tell you what, many of those guys were the guys you wanted to be on the floor when the game was on the line or you need your back turned. I never wondered if Ron Zetcher was going to leave me out there hanging. Um, After a tough call, I never wondered if Ron Zetcher was going to go over and try to suck up to the coach when I made a tough call. And there are a lot of guys, we don't have to get into naming them, that were fortunate enough to go to the Final Four. But you knew that some of those guys went there because of their relationship with the coordinator of officials. There were a lot of guys who did not go because they did not have the relationship with the coordinator of officials that certainly should have and would have really represented the game, the sport, as well as anybody who has ever gone, but we're not fortunate to go. So when I say, yeah, I'm happy, I'm fortunate enough to have worked 12 Final Fours, represented the United States at the World Games in Buenos Aires, Argentina, represented the United States and Russia at the Goodwill Games. I was fortunate enough, but I never once thought that, hey, there weren't a lot of other guys that could do just what I did or even do better. I'm gonna give you an example of a referee that never got to us got to the final eight, but was as good of a referee as you would ever see. And you wanted him on the game with you. And I've talked about you, but an Eric Harmon, okay, was a guy that you knew that when the chips were down, he was going to make the tough call. He was going to do what was right about the game. You knew and I can name some other guys, but I'm gonna just stay with him for a second there. He never got a chance to go to us. I don't think Eric even went to Sweet 16. But there's a perfect example of someone who could have gone and worked the Final Four. And so, again, you got to be fortunate, you got to be lucky. And I'd place you in that category as someone who certainly had all of the resume to do what I was fortunate enough to do.
And real quick, and then we can move on. I'll tell you the guy who made it, and he was a darn good Big Ten referee, no politician. The year that Gary Muncy went, good man, right, Ed?
Yep, solid. Gary
Solid.
Muncy. Gary Muncy not only was a solid referee, class referee, professional referee, but he cared about people and he cared about the game. And there were so many people pulling for him and were happy for him that he was able to get to that Final Four. And he represented himself extremely well.
Listen, do you remember the guy? He passed away during COVID, but remember the guy from Ladue, Bobby, who always went to all the games?
My gosh, yes.
All right, here we go, Hightower. So I have a game with Muncy. It's almost the first game of the year after he's worked a Final Four. It's here in St. Louis. And Bobby, of course, he's at every game. And all of a sudden I'm standing there, and here comes Bobby behind me. Hey, how you doing? I'm good, Bobby. He says, I see that Muncy's on the game. He was standing down on the other end. I said, hey, Bobby, go down there and tell Muncy that he had a terrible Final Four. Bingo. He's on his way down there. And he tells him, Ed. And Muncy, you know what a great guy he was, a sense of humor. He looked up at me and he went, you got to be kidding. Did you sent this guy down here? But anyway, listen, Ed, let me talk to you a little bit about your, we all know about your officiating, but tell me about your tenure. You started in Alton, Illinois, as the principal of a second grade. The whole building was second graders. Do I remember that correctly?
No, the whole building was third, fourth, and fifth grade.
Okay. And what was the name of the building? I remember.
Eunice Smith.
Eunice Smith. Yes, sir. Go ahead. So, and you told me one time that you had one of your nephews there because he was having a few behavior problems.
That's right.
And he was getting in trouble every day with his teacher.
That's right.
And then you had a conversation with him in the principal's office.
It was a one-way conversation, Ron. And when I was principal, I was fortunate enough that both of my two daughters went through my school as an elementary principal when I was assistant superintendent in Alton. And then, of course, Jennifer followed me over to Edwardsville as an eighth grader. And so my two daughters, and they were with me doing my whole education, basically career. And so I would tell them, and they knew it. I said, I had 350 students at Eunice Smith. And I would tell them in no uncertain terms, I'm going to only discipline 348 students here at school. So you think about, I'm going to let you determine and figure out what I just said. And I left it at that. They got the message. So I had, to be quite frank, I had two of my nephews go through Eunice Smith, and they were both a problem. Okay. And so I brought them in to my office and I said to them, I'm going to be upfront with you. Okay. Everybody knows that you are a relative of mine. You get no breaks. But I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to make good grades. You're going to represent your family. You're going to represent yourself. And let me tell you, you don't have a choice. Because if you don't, at that time, we could use corporal punishment.
A little paddle.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And I brought them in a couple of times in my office and I paddled them. And then I called their parents and said, I'm going to tell you right now, you should be doing this at home. But since you're not doing it at home and they're going to my school, I'm going to be checking their grades. I'm going to check their discipline. I'm going to check their behavior. And I'm going to deal with them. Now, if you don't like that, then you have an option. And I always just say, you can exercise that option or I'm going to exercise it for you. That was my rule of thumb all the way through education as I work with kids. But my two nephews, boy, you have a good memory.
Hey, listen, I also did some research, and you and I both had almost the same. It worked out for both of us. You had some problems when you were in the elementary school, not being respected by most of your teachers, and they were not being very good to you. But you met a teacher who really helped you so much, Miss Jackson.
Oh, yes. Well, let's go back to Miss Jackson, Ron. A lot of people don't realize I am from the South. I grew up in the Boot Hills of Missouri. And my mom and dad, there are 8 of us children, 6 boys, 2 girls. My mom and dad divorced when I was 12 years old. And of course, my mom reared all of us. I worked in the cotton fields. My oldest sister and I, we would have to take turns going to school and then staying home and babysitting the younger siblings while my mom worked. And of course, things were tough for us. Money was scarce. It was tough. Life was really, really tough in the Boot Hills of the South. And I can remember vividly my 3rd grade teacher. She had no business being in education, and if she would have worked for me once I became an administrator, I would have fired her. But unfortunately, she was there. And I can remember, and I tell folks this on a regular basis when I talk to educators, you have to be careful what you say to young people because they believe you. You're the adult in the room. They believe you. They trust you. And she would come in and she was quite ruthless. She told me, I remember she told me I was stupid. She told me I was retarded, told me I would never amount to anything. Well, that was the 3rd grade teacher. And
Unreal, unbelievable.
it is. But then I had Miss Jackson, my 4th grade teacher. She didn't look at me because I didn't have much. She looked up on me as one of her students. And this lady inspired me. She was with me. She encouraged me. And even today, when I talk to large groups, I go back to my 4th grade teacher, Miss Jackson. And of course, I have to say, I was in love with Miss Jackson. She was a gorgeous lady. And I thought that she was in love with me. And I tell Barbara this, that Barbara, I've only been in love with two people, two females. One was Miss Jackson, and the other one was you. I have to say, Barbara, Miss Jackson, she barely beat you out.
Yeah. Well,
But
Ed, when I was I was troubled when I was in elementary school as a student, and I also never ran into a teacher that really. And then I had a 5th grade teacher by the name of Miss Margaret Palmer, and at U City that year, Jackson Park Elementary School was overcrowded, so all the 5th grade was across the street at U City High School on the
uh-huh.
first floor. You could open the window and you could walk right out the window and be right on the grass. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I had a dog, and there was no leash law in those days, Ed, and you can't make this up. And that dog would follow me to school almost every day. And then
Wow.
they'd call my mother, and my mother would come up, walk up, wasn't that far, get the dog. So this went on for quite a while. Finally, Miss Margaret Palmer said to my mom, it looks like it's a nice little dog. If Ronnie wants to keep the dog under his desk, it's okay.
Wow.
So I kept the dog under my desk. So then one day, talking about the windows and, being close to the ground, and all these high school guys, they'd walk by and they'd look at us, the fifth graders, and they'd give us up some nasty stuff. Oh, look at the little boys over here at the high school. So one day, my middle finger went where it shouldn't have gone, and Miss Margaret Palmer saw it, and she loved me and I loved her. She said, Ronnie, you're not, no, you're just not ready for fifth grade. You need to go across to Jackson Park, and you go into kindergarten for about 2 or 3 days. That's the way it goes. So everybody asked me, how'd you feel in the kindergarten? I said, it was the first time in school that I really believed I was the smartest kid in the room. And what experience about Miss Margaret Palmer that summer? She traveled and she sent me a postcard, and it was a beautiful postcard. And she said, honey, you haunt me. And on the back, she said, I hope you're playing baseball every day. I know that's your passion, and so forth. So we remember those kind, don't we, Ed?
Yeah, Ron, and in every child's life, there is a teacher that they will go back to that said made a difference in them.
Can't
And
say that.
that's another true statement there. Every child has a teacher that made the difference.
So my grandson, Jake Brown, he sent me some really neat stuff here today. He sent me a couple of questions that I should ask you. And
Sure.
he's really smart. And these are great questions. They're not to get One of the things he wanted to know, is there any one game, and this is really a long storied career of yours, Ed, but was there any one game where you had a call in that game that kept you up that night?
Yes. Yes. No, it was a situation. It was a situation that Ron, and we won't discuss the person's name, the official, but you know him very well. We were
I know.
working.
Go ahead.
We were working Iowa at North Carolina. Well, as you recall, Coach Dean Smith, he knew every official, and when you work one of his games, he had studied you. He knew you, even if you didn't know about him. And he would always say, "Mr. Hightower, Mr. Zetcher, how are you doing?" And even when he addressed you out on the floor, was Mr. Zetcher. I think that was not a very good call. But he would never use profanity and all that type of stuff. That was Dean. And also, if you recall, his players back then, they knew every official. When they walked up, and if they disagreed with a call, they would say, "Mr. Hightower, I don't know about that call. Would you? You may have missed that call." They were always professional. That was the Dean Smith model with his players. So we got Iowa. We're on CBS, national televised game. You know this guy very well. This official was so arrogant. He was so arrogant. But he was best of friends with at that time, supervisor of the Big Ten officiating staff. Okay. He was also an NFL referee. And I know you will put the name there. Well, with that, we go, and we've got a close game. And again, it's on national television. Iowa was very good at that time. Dean Smith at North Carolina, both were very, very good. This was a stellar game, and the referee that I'm speaking of should have never been on that game. But the supervisor of officials was pushing him, and he would put him in those big games. So now we're going down the stretch. And Iowa had two players. They looked just like each other. And the referee had made the call. We're at the free throw line, and there are only about 4 seconds in the game. It's a 1-point game. 1-point game. So with that, Iowa put the wrong shooter to the line. I went to this referee and said to him, I said, "You got the wrong shooter." And I'm going to come back to Ron Zetcher in just a moment here. That why I always enjoyed refereeing with Ron Zetcher. So I said to the official, "You got the wrong shooter. You got to switch that." He looked at me. He said, "No, I don't. I've got the correct effing shooter." I quote him. "I've got the correct effing shooter, and I'm not changing." Dean Smith called me over after that and said, "Mr. Hightower," he says, "I know, you know, that is not the right shooter." And he says, "I trust you. I see that you've done everything that you can to get this guy to change the shooter." We go on, and Eric Harmon was also on that game. Again, perfect example. Eric went over and talked to this guy. Well, let me fast forward. Iowa went on to beat North Carolina by 1 point, national TV. I'm not kidding you. We are blistered. The supervisor official, all he would say was, "Who made the call?" Well, it was your boy who made the call.
Thank you.
So I stayed up. We flew back. I'm devastated. I am absolutely devastated. The next day, I called Dean Smith. And I said, "Coach," I said, "I'm not going to get into all of the particulars." I said, "But I just want you to know that I am sorry for what happened in that game." I was the lead referee. I said, "I am sorry for what happened on Saturday." Okay. We did your team, and we, not an official. I said, we did your team an injustice, and I'm sorry. And his words to me were, and I quote, and I tell the story on a regular basis: "No official is bigger than the game. No official is bigger than the game. You have to live within yourself, live with yourself after a call. And if somebody comes to you and offer you help, you accept that help and you move on." Now, Dean always respected Ed Hightower. He was one of my biggest fans. Now, let me bring this back to Ron Zetcher for a moment. You're going to remember this call. You and I were refereeing the Iowa State game, Johnny Orr.
Yes, sir. I remember it. Well, go ahead. I remember it well.
And Ron Zetcher, we're going down the stretch in this game. It is a back and forward game. Both teams are going after each other. Both were very good. And with that, you call a goaltending. Remember that?
Offensive goaltending.
So with that, okay, and the game was being played at Iowa State, and those crazy fans at Iowa State, they were ballistic, as well as Johnny Orr. He could just go up and just be a volcano. So I came to you and said, "Ron," I said, "Ron, that it was a defensive goaltending."
You're right.
Yeah, it was a defensive goaltending. And I said, "Ron, I got to tell you that that ball never had a chance to get to the rim. Ron, this is a game changer." And I remember you saying so well, "Okay, did you see it?" "Yes, I did." "Okay." You immediately, we walked over and we said, "We're changing this." We told Johnny Orr, and even Johnny Orr, who knew that we had made a mistake, said, gain a lot of respect for you and me. And it was at Hilton Arena.
And I remember what he also said as we walked down there, because he knew
Exactly.
he knew that you had given me good information. But here's what he said,
Exactly.
Ed. As we're walking towards him, he stands up, and he was a crusty guy. But he says, "Oh, okay, yeah." The great Hightower just told you what to do. I said, "Well, you know what? The great Hightower gave me information, John, and I took it. Yeah, you son of a..." And he goes and sits
Yeah.
down, right?
Yeah. And then, but he knew what's the right. He knew it was the right call.
Sure, he did.
Let me tell you what. This was a Ron Zetcher. It became a Ron Zetcher rule of thumb in officiating. If somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I know that this was right," and this became the Ron Zetcher rule of officiating, particularly in the Big Ten, then it kind of migrated out. If somebody comes to you with definite information, you accept it.
You better.
You accept it. And Ron, you always say, well, if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I saw this," hey, if you're right, everybody's happy. If they gave you bad information, you can just say, "Hey, he gave me information that I didn't have, and it's on him now.
Go talk to him."
Go
right,
talk
Ed?
to him."
Absolutely. Listen, Mr. Hightower, I want to talk to you. Here's another one he had here. My grandson's great.
Good.
He said, "Ask Ed, did the officiating career he had help him as an administrator, or vice versa? Did the administration of the school districts and the school buildings help you? Which transition the best?"
Boy, your grandson he's profound. He has some tough questions. The answer, they were both synonymous. Why? You were in a high pressurized situation. As a superintendent of schools, I had 7,600 students, 1,100 employees, thousands of parents. I went into the game of basketball. You got 10 kids out there, high stakes. You got thousands of millions of people watching on TV. Both are high stakes. It's all about exercising proper judgment at the end of the day. Secondly, it's about doing what's right, even when the situation is difficult. Do what's right. And if you do what's right, you make it a point of doing what's right about people and for people. At the end of the day, you're going to come out on top, even though at the time it may be difficult. You may be criticized, but you will be successful in the end because people will say, "I can trust that person to do the right thing." It's not about who you are, how much money you have, but it's about this guy or this person is going to use proper judgment and do what's right about people and for the game.
That's the bottom line, Ed. I mean, it's not that hard. My grandson, she was one other thing he wanted me to ask you about here. Well, basically, I can answer it for him. He wanted to know, like, with 20,000 people in the stands and all the pressure of a big game and this and that and whatever. What was your mindset? And I can remember many games that I worked with you. I think you and I and whoever the third guy was, we took a shower after the game and we talked about what we did right, what we did wrong. And before the game, you were really. I wasn't very good in pre games. I kind of like let it go off, the seat of my pants. You talk about a few things, but your pre-games, they took care of every possible situation that could possibly happen in the game. And if the guys who were working with you were paying attention, for sure they weren't going to make those kind of mistakes. And the thing, and you probably would agree with this, Ed. One of the things I did tell when I was a referee, I would just tell my crew, I said, a hand checking, that's a big deal. So the first hand check, it's got to be a college hand check, guys, because if the first hand check is one that you would call, in a little ninth grade game, we got problems because the other guys are going to have to call the same thing to
That's
be
right.
consistent. And the worst game in the world is if one guy's got good hand checking, the other guy kind of like, I'm not sure, and the third guy doesn't do anything. You got a really bad basketball game, right, Ed?
Absolutely. And, Ron, it's the same thing with administration. As I teach administration, I taught leadership over at St. Louis University when I was working on my doctorate. I also taught leadership responsibilities at SIU before I went on the board of trustees. And I carried the same motto into the games. Preparation, preparation, preparation. Preparation meets opportunity. People say, well, why is this person more successful than the next person? If you prepare yourself, always do so preparing for the unknown, the unanticipated. Unknown, unanticipated. And the only way that you can do that is review with your crew if this happens. If this happens, if this happens, know the tendencies. If this happens, like you talked about hand checking, you remember we would always talk about, okay, now don't go out there and stick a foul on someone, a phantom foul in the first minute of the game.
You got a bad game
Okay,
ahead of you.
if you have to see the call, be patient, because what you're doing is putting your crew under the gun. And what we want, not consistency. There's no such thing. Anybody who believes that, oh, I want consistency from game to game. No, there is no such thing. Remember, you're dealing with people, personalities, not going to happen. But what you want is consistency within that game on that night. If Missouri is playing St. Louis U, what we want is for those three guys or those three individuals to go out there and be consistent within the game. And you never make a call. You start off properly the first 3 minutes of the game. You end the first half the last 2 minutes of the game. You start the second half the first 3 minutes of the game, and then the end of the game, that last 3 minutes of the game. Why is that? Because that team in the last 3 minutes, so often, depending on the situation, you foul that good player out in the last 3 minutes, that team doesn't have a chance to rebound. You are bounce back. You make a terrible traveling call in the last 2 minutes when the score is tied and you've got a phantom. That team emotionally, psychologically, a lot of times can't rebound. That's where we have to be. I won't say, never say bigger than the game, but you have to be better, not bigger, better than the players out there. And it's incumbent on those three officials to be responsible and referee within the game. And that's the one thing that we always would do, and I would demand that when with my crew when we went out there on the floor.
Well, I had a young lady in here yesterday. We did a podcast because that's about the only time I could get her. Tamar Shear. I don't know if you know her, but she's the
Yep.
night. Yeah, she's Channel 4 gal, and she's an awesome gal. So anyway, it was very interesting. She's an Indiana gal, and her mom and dad both went to Indiana. And you remember when her father went with you and me to an Indiana game. We all drove together, and we went into a McDonald's, and it's on the podcast. And I said to her fa- I said to her dad that day, I said, when we go into McDonald's right outside of Bloomington, Hightower always wants to get himself a hamburger or what kind of deal they. And when we walked in there, everybody in there like came running. That's Ed Hightower's here. Eddie Hightower's here. Oh, ooh. And I said to I said to her dad, I said, you and I, we'll just go sit in the back, get us a little bag of French fries, and let Ed can sign a bunch of autographs. But it was awesome. But listen, that her family, when Cheney came here to St. Louis, Ed, and listen to this, and he became an assistant for St. Louis University, her family, because she knew him from Indiana, they embraced him. They became really close
Oh,
family
wow.
members. Oh, very close. And so I was trying to remember when I was talking to her when Cheney broke that record. And
That's right.
was it a season record or an all-time Indiana record
All
that
time Indiana record.
you presented him the basketball? Did you not at that game?
That is correct. Kevin, people ask me who was your all time favorite, and I say to them, I have two all time favorites. Certainly, Kevin Cheney was one of my all time favorites, and Herschel Hawkins from Bradley was a second one of my all time favorites. Okay, and both of them were classy individuals. Well, and you refereed a lot of both of their games, but speaking of Kevin Cheney, I would go out there, and the players all knew us. They knew the referees, and of course, they were sucking up to us before the game. And I would always, when they'd come up to me, I would always, and I had a special relationship with Cheney, and I would say, "How's school going?" That's how I would always say, "How's school going? Going to class?" Mr. Hightower, are you kidding me? I don't have a choice.
He had a pretty damn good coach too.
Yeah, just an average coach with no rules, no expectations. Mr. Hightower, are you kidding me? I go to class. That guy over there, he's going to check and make sure I'm in class. Okay, good. So we would talk education, he and I. We would not talk basketball. It was always about education and life. The kid was so mature and great. And Coach Knight knew that Cheney and I had a great relationship, as well as Coach Knight and I had an outstanding relationship. Of course, we'd fight on the floor from time to time. But I tell you what, you didn't have trouble with his kids. You didn't have trouble with his fans. You knew the expectations going in. You refereed the game, and he could sit there for 38 minutes and never say a word. Then he would explode on you if he thought that you were right. And guess what? 99% of the time, he was right. He knew that You refereed a lot of games for him, and if you knew how to handle him, you would just say, "Coach, you may be right," and let it go. Don't argue with him. You may be right. And I adopted that early in my career with him, and I used it with every coach going forward. You may be right, because they're going to go back, and you knew Coach Knight was looking at that film before you even got showered after the game. And then, of course, my attitude was, if I was right, he was going to say, that guy has humility. That guy has humility. He didn't argue with me. He said, you may be right. And then let the film dictate if you were right or wrong.
Ed, go ahead. No, go ahead.
And again, I learned that from Ron Zetcher. Don't argue with those coaches.
When I retired, unbeknownst to me, my son-in-law Andy Brown, he's married to my oldest daughter Stephanie.
Yes.
He wrote letters and made phone calls to many coaches that I had officiated for, Ed, over the years. I had no idea. He got all this beautiful, documented, treasures. and he put a scrapbook together for me. I never
Wow.
take it out of the house. I
Wow.
don't. And so Bob Knight, and this is the ultimate compliment. And I got some nice words from people when I tell people, well, yeah, they made a lot of nice comments because they're glad they didn't have to see me anymore. But
Yeah.
Knight said, what I liked about you, Ron, is that you never thought you were bigger than the game, and you listened, and I loved having you.
Bottom line, that's
Amen.
that is the compliment that every official should aspire to receive during their career and after they leave the game. Tom Izzo and I, we would get after each other during the game. But you know what? Tom Izzo, as you refereed him, he was just a blue collar worker and a class act that you wanted to go to battle with. Bob Knight was a guy that I wanted to go to battle with because he made me better.
He did
He
make us
he
better.
challenged us.
You
He
know,
challenged us.
I walked into Michigan State one night. I walked in there, and Izzo is standing right at the door where we come in. I'm going,
Yes.
well, he says, I need to talk to you. I'm going, I've never had a problem with this guy. What he wants to talk to me? I want to go to the locker room and get ready for. No, I said, come on, I want to talk to you. Come over here. He says to me, he says, Ron, I'm going to ask you a question. He said, are you a freshman football coach at Ladue? I said, yes, sir. He says, you know what? He said, that's the first job I had up in Iron Mountain when I was a high school teacher and coach. I was a freshman football coach. That's the most fun I ever had. And
Yeah.
that was it. And he walked away, and that was it. Well, listen, Mr. Hightower, we're way over time, and I'm going to get in trouble. But let's finish this off with I'm going to tell you who I think this is my Mount Rushmore of referees. Okay,
Go right ahead.
and I'm not going to put them in order. That's not fair. You know what I mean? I'm
No.
just going to put them. But since I'm looking right at you, Ed Hightower certainly is on the Mount Rushmore. Henry Nichols on the Mount Rushmore because of what he did and how he got the minorities started years ago. Booker Turner. What do you think, Ed?
You hit it on it. You can just remove me from that list. But the two guys that I think, number one is Henry Nichols. I say this, and he just passed away, as you know.
Yes.
Hank Nichols was the best referee that ever walked onto the floor. Let me just tell you why, if you got 10 seconds here. Number one, he was the dean of the education department at Villanova. It was Dr. Henry Nichols.
Yes, sir.
He was a great communicator. He was a hard worker. When he walked onto the floor, he demanded, not verbally, but he demanded respect because of the way he carried himself. And he never big time younger officials. He never threw young officials out the pasture. He protected, he mentored, he nurtured young officials. And then Booker Turner was my second. So you and I, we're on the same page.
One more.
Henry Nichols, number one. And we can rank him. Henry Nichols, number one, the best official to ever work. And then Booker Turner because of what he did for the game.
Ed Hightower, and then one last guy that I'm going to throw on there, pretty damn good referee too. Passed away way too young. Guy by the name of Herb Brown.
Oh, Herb Brown, you know what? Herb Brown because of the way he ran the game. And quick one story, this one coach said, you know what? Herb Brown, they can be fighting out there on the floor. And because Herb Brown would walk over and say, don't worry, coach, I've got it. I've got it. And the kids are just drawing blood out on the floor. But the way that he held the game and held coaches, and then the last 3 minutes of the game, they knew that you wanted Herb Brown on that game on the road because he was going to control that game. Now, he may let him just draw blood during the whole game. Don't worry, coach. I got it. I got it. I have it. I have it under control. But the last 3 minutes of the game, you wanted that guy in the game.
Well, Ed, this has been an absolutely phenomenal hour together. And as soon as I get what they'll do is they will send it to my grandson, to look at it, if it has to be edited or anything. And then I'll before it goes public, it'll be out next Thursday. It'll actually be out for all of our friends to see, but I will send it to you way before then, okay? And for you to look, this has been a delightful time. And one last thing I want to say, I remember years ago, you and I, you're an African American, and I'm a Jewish boy, and we sat in a car at the parking lot at the Marriott coming back from a game, and we talked about growing up and how in U City in those days,
Yep.
the Jewish mothers used to have an African American lady come in, and
Yep.
I told you that I had great parents, and when this African American lady who used to come and clean our house, and my mom and dad didn't have a lot of money, I think this lady came once every 3 weeks, or you know what I'm saying, and my mom and dad demanded, when she comes in this house, you better respect that lady, son.
Yep.
I better never hear anything but the right thing.
Right.
And I mean, and that's the way we're supposed to live our life, isn't it?
Ron, again, I talk about friendship. You and I have had again, we've both been out of officiating for a lot of years now, but we have maintained that relationship, that friendship, that respect for each other over the years. And it goes back, respect is not something that you learn. Respect is something that you either have or you don't have. And then you mature in that respect that you have, that innate respect that you have developed over a period of time. And that's how I see yours and my relationship. And I wish you the absolute best with your podcast. It's obvious that you're putting in a lot of time. I do follow you on Facebook and read a lot of your comments and all. And it's just a pleasure having you as a long years of friendship.
Well, I'm honored. I'm honored to be your friend. I really am. Thank you. And listen, one of these nights, Barb and you and Sue and I, maybe we'll go out to dinner.
Are you buying?
You took the words out of my mouth. That's what I was going to say.
You wanted to say if I would.
Are you buying?
Well, see, that's what I'm
You
talking about.
got more money than me, Hightower. I know that.
That's why, Ron, as we close this out, that's why I wanted to get that out in front of everybody so they know that always hit Ron Zetcher first because it's coming.
You got it, buddy. Stay well, Ed. You look like $1 million.
Hey,
okay.
Same here, Ron. Be good,
and
babe.
All you people, when you listen to this, if you like it, please put a like and then share with your friends, okay? You're going to hear, you people will be lucky to hear this podcast because you're going to hear from the greatest, or one of the four, we got four, one of the four greatest in our opinion, and it's important, our opinion counts, for the greatest that ever went on the hardwood. And you, my friend, you're right at the very top. Thank you.
You're kind, Ron. Appreciate you. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Remember, it's a gorgeous day outside, and I always leave you people with this. Today is the youngest you will ever be. Take advantage of it. Have a great day.